Have you ever seen someone fall from the sky and still walk away alive? Sounds impossible, right? But what if I told you this story is about a woman who was thrown from a helicopter at 2,000 feet and lived because she wasn't just anyone. She was a U.S. Army Ranger, and Rangers don't need parachutes to survive. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Grow for Justice, where we share real and inspired stories of bravery, truth, and survival that'll give you goosebumps. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from right now? Now, let's dive into a story that'll make your heart race. The sun burned hot over the Afghan desert that morning. The air shimmered, heavy with dust and silence. Captain Elena Ross sat inside the roaring helicopter, her helmet tight, her hands steady, her mind sharper than ever. She wasn't like the others. She was the only woman in an elite Ranger unit deployed on a classified recovery mission deep inside hostile territory. For weeks, they'd been tracking a rogue faction responsible for downing a U.S. convoy and taking prisoners. The intel was clear. The hostages were alive but guarded in a mountain outpost that even drones couldn't see clearly. Elena wasn't just a soldier. She was the team's tactical heart. She'd saved lives before, made calls no one else dared, and survived things that would have broken most. But this time, things would go very differently. The helicopter blades sliced through the air as the team approached the drop zone. 5 minutes, the pilot shouted. Elena checked her gear, her rifle, her comms. Everything was in order, but the tension inside the chopper wasn't just about the mission. Two of her team members, Sergeant Doyle and Private Keene, had made their dislike for her painfully clear. They didn't believe a woman should be leading any part of a Ranger op, especially not one this dangerous. When command had assigned her as tactical coordinator, Doyle had muttered under his breath, "Rangers are no place for politics." She'd ignored it. She always did. But deep down, she knew there was a brewing storm as they crossed into the mountain zone. The helicopter hit sudden turbulence. The pilot cursed as wind whipped across the rotors. Elena steadied herself, but then noticed something strange. The door to her right was unlatched. Before she could react, Doyle turned to her, his eyes cold. "You think you belong here?" he sneered. "What are you?" But before the words left her mouth, he shoved her hard. The world spun. The roar of the blades vanished into the screaming wind. And then she was falling 2,000 feet above jagged rocks. She plummeted through the air. There was no parachute and no safety. Only shock, wind, and the knowledge that this was no accident. It was murder. But training takes over where fear begins. Rangers are taught to adapt, overcome, and survive. Elena twisted her body midair, spreading her arms to slow descent, angling toward a ravine below. Beneath her, the terrain wasn't just rock. Part of it looked like a slope of sand and brush. She shifted her weight, bent her knees, and aimed for that patch. Seconds felt like hours, the air toward her face. Her heart hammered. Then, impact. Pain exploded through her body, white-hot and blinding. The world turned black. When she opened her eyes again, it was night. She was alive. Barely. Her ribs screamed with every breath. One arm refused to move, and her radio was smashed beyond repair. But the stars above reminded her she'd landed in enemy territory, miles from any friendly base. She dragged herself to a rocky overhang and took shelter. Her mind replayed the moment Doyle pushed her. Rage burned through her exhaustion that if she survived this, she promised herself she'd make them answer for I teed up EY Dawn. She had torn strips from her shirt to bandage her wounds and scavenge from her broken pack. A small knife, a compass, half a protein bar. That was all. Then she heard it. Voices in the distance, enemy patrols. Searching, she crawled behind cover, every breath agony. Through the dust, she could see armed fighters combing the slopes. If they found her, it was over. But Elena wasn't built to quit. She moved only when they weren't looking, inch by inch, downhill toward a dry stream bed that cut through the mountain. Using her training, she covered her tracks with fallen branches and small stones. Hours passed. Her throat burned from thirst. But by late afternoon, she saw something, smoke, and beside it, an outpost, the one they'd come to find. Through her scope, she could see three hostages, one American soldier barely conscious, the others local guides. The mission wasn't over. Even after what had been done to her, she refused to abandon what she'd been sent for. She waited till dusk. Then she crawled closer, inch by inch, until she was 50 yards away. And no backup. No radio. No weapon except a knife. But she had one advantage: surprise. When darkness fell, she moved like a shadow that a guard stepped outside, and never saw her coming but a quick strike, silent and clean. She caught his rifle before it hit the ground. Within minutes, two more went down. The hostages stirred, eyes wide as she cut through their restraints. "Who are you?" one whispered. "Ranger," she said simply. "We're getting out." The weak soldier she helped to his feet, Private Lang, the man she'd risked her career to protect. But as they moved toward the exit, headlights flared in the distance. A convoy. Reinforcements. They had minutes, maybe less. Elena led them into the ravine, knowing there was a waterfall about a mile south. The map in her head was precise. She'd memorized it during mission briefings. Behind them, the rebels shouted, firing into the dark. Bullets cracked the air. One hostage stumbled. Elena threw herself between him and the gunfire, her arms searing as a bullet grazed her shoulder. She didn't stop to be by the time they reached the edge of the waterfall. There was no path left, only 100-foot drop into the river below. Lang looked at her, terrified. What now? Elena took a breath. Now we jump. And they did. The cold water hit like cement. Elena's lungs screamed as she fought the current, dragging Lang toward the surface. When they finally reached the bank, they collapsed under the trees, coughing and shaking. Behind them, gunfire faded. They were safe for now. Lang looked at her, eyes full of disbelief. They said, "You were dead." Elena managed a faint smile. "Not today." It took them 3 days to reach the extraction point. 3 days of hunger, heat, and pain, but also of quiet determination. When the rescue helicopter finally appeared over the horizon, Elena waved the signal cloth she'd torn from her sleeve. The moment she stepped aboard, every soldier inside froze. Her team, the same Rangers who thought she was gone. Doyle's face went pale. She didn't say a word. She just handed Lang over to the medics, saluted the pilot, and turned away. Command would hear the truth soon enough. Weeks later, back at Fort Benning, an inquiry was held. Doyle and Keene were arrested, charged with attempted murder and treason for endangering an Allied operation. When the tribunal asked Elena what kept her alive, she said something that silenced the entire room. "Rangers don't fight for survival," she said. "We fight for purpose." Her survival wasn't luck. It was grit, training, faith, and a heart that refused to surrender, no matter how far she fell. Months later, she stood on a quiet hill, watching another group of young recruits begin their Ranger training. They didn't know her story, not officially at least, but whispers spread, as they always do. The woman who fell from the sky and lived. They called her Ghost Talk. Elena just smiled. Because legends don't need to speak, they just rise again and again. And that's the story, friends, of a soldier who was thrown away and still came back stronger than ever. If this story inspired you, moved you, or gave you chills, make sure to subscribe to Grow for Justice, where real courage lives, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from today? Your country, your city? I want to know where our justice-loving family is growing around the world. Because stories like this remind us of one truth. You can throw a ranger out of the sky, but you can never bring her down.